Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we ended up fighting both Black Legion and Alpha Legion, and this time we're gonna head back in and continue fighting the Alpha Legion supported rebel forces.
Another field of war, another day to serve the Emperor with our lives. If only I could smash through the ranks of those filthy heretics.
Your day will come.
You carry the Emperor's will, Inquisitor. Destroy the heretics.
So, this episode was intended to be a lore episode on the White Scars, but doing my research I realized they have very little lore. Like, realistically, originally I had said, oh, these are one of the most forgotten Space Marine chapters, and going through the lore I realized, damn, they're even forgotten by Games Workshop. Because their Unification Wars lore is effectively, hey, they couldn't find their Primarch, so they were just doing their usual hit and run stuff. They were spread out super thin, and as a result the 5th Legion was near collapse. Then they found Jagatai Khan, they reformed, had a resurgence in their numbers, started getting better, and then the Horus Heresy came. Khan was friends with Horus and Magnus the Red, and both of them were like, hey, you should totally join us in our rebellion. And the whole time he's like, nah, I just want to play it safe. Throughout the war, there were instances where they would help Lehman Russ and help the Loyalists, and he came into contact with a astral projection, effectively, of Magnus, who's like, hey, you should join us. And Jagatai was like, nah, I'm not doing it. You know, I don't vibe with this. Then Mortarion showed up and said the same thing, hey, you should join us. And he once again said, no. While the Emperor is a tyrant to us, Horus is a slave to the warp. Effectively, better the devil I know than the devil I don't. And then he fought Mortarion. Mortarion backed off because Mortarion had the endurance, but Khan had the speed. And as a result, that fight ended. He went to go... He had to carve his way through space because he was cut off through warp storms and stuff. His top psyker sacrificed himself so that they could get to Terra, helped participate in the Siege of Terra defending, and then, the Horus Heresy ends. From there, they just kind of do their thing as the White Scars. The whole scar thing is actually from a blooding ritual they had done, where a bunch of the members had carved a mark on themselves with a knife. And then, at one instance, Jagatai was leading a group, fought Dark Eldar, chased them into the webway, and he was reported lost. And that's effectively their lore. Both his and the chapter. At that point, they just start going into they were participated at this battle in whatever time in the 40th millennium and the 41st. And I'm like, so these guys really just don't have lore. I didn't expect them to be Ultramarine levels of lore, but I expected a little more than just, hey, here's a little bit of what's happened and that's all. Even the stuff about them as just an interpersonal thing, it's like, yeah, they were really cultured. They were cool with, poetry. And that was it. I was like, oh, that's all? Which just goes to show, one, I literally just ran through all of their lore in maybe 5 minutes. And then the second thing is, they're really that forgotten. I would put them almost on the level of, honestly, a lot of the old chapters. where it's like, hey, here's, you know, a little bit of lore moving on. And it's disappointing because this is a main chapter. You know, this is an original founding group. This was the 5th Legion. But it's just like, yep, here's a little bit, moving on. You know, I'd love to see Jagatai Khan come back, because he was one of the few who actually got along with some of the, you could label them as evil Primarchs. You know, I want to see how he would react to seeing Magnus the Red now. Horus, you know, he can't really do anything about it since Horus is dead. But I'd like to see, what would he do with Magnus? Would he just be like, man, look at you, you've really fallen off L plus ratio? Or would he be like, hey, maybe we can change this, maybe we can turn this around? I know behind that big goofy red skin of yours you're still a decent guy somewhere. I'd like to see that. Because honestly, being lost after going after the Dark Eldar, I assume he's just literally not dead lost, but just stuck somewhere. But I also feel like Games Workshop's never going to expand on that. You know, it's one of those things where they're like, either they literally forgot, or there's just no interest. I mean, come on, I think the Iron Hands have more lore. I know for a fact Space Wolves do. That's to be expected. But I mean, come on. It's pretty bad. The only other... now I'm thinking about it, if we're going from most remembered Loyalist chapters to least remembered, it would be Space Marine, or yeah, Ultramarines are this top. Ultramarines have to be the top most remembered because they're everywhere. Then Blood Angels, I'd say Space Wolves, Salamanders, Space Wolves, Iron Hands, Salamanders, Black Templars, Raven Guard, White Scars. I don't think that's forgetting anybody. If it is, then that just shows you how forgettable whoever's left is. But it's disappointing because, you know, I don't think any of the main groups should be that forgotten. Like successor chapters that have more lore. I can almost guarantee that. Probably just go kill this commander instead of trying to map clear. But yeah, I'm glad I had scrapped the video initially because, like I said, 5 minutes and I covered everything of importance. Then it goes to show kind of how some lore videos that really drag stuff out don't need to. Because there's a lot of minutia, yeah, but who's really gonna sit there and be like, what was their name before they were the White Scars? It's like, I think it's like the Night Hunters, and if it isn't, who cares? This is Unification War. They're wearing like Thunder Warrior armor. I don't even think we have miniatures of that. And it's not like that gets touched on anywhere. It's not like we have a Unification Wars or Horus Heresy video game. I'd kill for that. I think a Horus Heresy video game could offer a lot for players. But it'll never happen because, you know, it's not the new thing. a Horus Heresy game isn't selling orc miniatures or fancy chaos miniatures. It's not selling Primaris Marines. And honestly, I don't know how good it would be. Because you could do battles based on all these different time frames, but a lot of the time frames just kind of sucked. You know, the Dark Age technology. All that's gonna do is remind people, hey, remember all the cool gear this time frame had that you don't get anymore? That's already what Horus Heresy does. You know, we're sitting here like, oh, I wish I could have had that. No, this was a cool thing, or that was a cool thing. Wish I could get some Sakaran tanks or fancy weapons, but no, you don't get any of that.
Inquisitor, the main routes are still blocked by the rebels. Our men have engaged them, but it could take a while until we can break through.
Death in the line of duty is the most honorable sacrifice. Send in more guards.
I can assure you that we will spare no fire or manpower to get through. However, we can't use heavy artillery. Otherwise, we will destroy the routes for our own troops.
This is no Tell the PDF present. I will defend the sacred conversation chamber as long as I can.
May the Emperor be your strength.
I think one big problem when it comes to lore for the White Scars, and this is a problem almost every chapter faces for the Loyalists, is the story never goes to their holdings. There's never an instance where you're sitting there going, oh, you know, Chaos came here, any of that. Look at Macragge. Macragge has had both Tyrannid and Chaos Invasion within relatively recent time frame. What other Space Marine like capital has nearly that much action going on? I can't think of any. And that's kind of the problem, because then all the attention just gets diverted to the Ultramarines, and their information just gets longer and longer. It's just more and more crap for the Ultramarines. It's getting to the point, honestly, where I think they should just get rid of chapters for Space Marines and just have Space Marines. And I don't mean this as a good idea, I think it's a stupid idea, but the way they are so heavy-handed in just being like, yeah, Ultramarines for everything, it just strips away any interest in other factions. And that favoritism, whether it's intentional or not, hurts the game. It hurts the franchise. Because I'm sick of the Ultramarines. I hate seeing their goofy blue asses everywhere. Like, yeah, I get it, it's the common meme of being like, they're called the Ultra Smurfs. They get the derision for a reason. Nobody's talking a ton of shit on, you know, the Salamanders, or a great example, the White Scars. Nobody talks shit about them, because there's not enough to hate about them. I feel like most instances where they're actually involved in a fight is probably just one line that's like, oh yeah, they're here too. Here's Brother What's-His-Name leading the What's-It's-Called unit, and they did a thing back to the Ultramarines and how cool they are. It's like, come on, give us a little bit here. Some chapters need some love. I think about there was a book on space sharks. That was cool. I like seeing smaller chapters or less well-known ones get some attention. It's a lot better than just the same group. Is them or the Grey Knights? I feel like it's, I would honestly say, a good 40-40-20 split as to whether or not it's Space Marines, Grey Knights, or anybody else. And it bums me out because honestly, the Grey Knights aren't that cool. Oh, they're the special demon killer unit. Yeah, and everything about them is supposed to be shrouded in mystery. And it reminds me of late 2000s, like, Wattpad fanfiction kind of stuff. Where it's like, oh, they're super edgy and cool and everybody likes them and they got all the superpowers and can't be hurt. And it's like, give me a break here, man. I want some good stories about other groups. There's an anthology for... Oh god, it had some stuff for salamanders, and it was really good. Because you got to see that the salamanders, they had, you know, on their homeworld, they had a caste system, or a class system at least. There were battle brothers who were higher in the class system, and they were openly assholes to the brothers who came from lower classes. And I thought that was cool. So I thought, damn, that's believable. That is an interesting fact about this group. I would like to know more. I just feel like, especially with White Scars, there's a good chance they're just gonna keep being like, yep, it's Space Mongolians. Which is cool, you know. Mongolian history is interesting. But you gotta, you know, mix it up a little bit. You gotta make them something else. That's why I know I had said long ago I'd love to see a samurai Space Marine chapter. You know, power swords that are katanas and their armor looks different. It'd be great, but I don't trust Games Workshop to give them depth, and I don't trust them to give them proper attention, because they're struggling to give attention as is. And it's a shame, because stuff like that would be cool. And I don't know why it is. If it's because of how they do write, like, their books. Because I remember one of the guys, he did one of the Space Sharks books. He had effectively said, people asked him, you know, do you get to choose what you write? And he pretty much said, look, they give you kind of an idea. Like, hey, we want a book on this group. And you make it. And I think that kind of kneecaps things. I get it, you don't want conflicting stories. You don't want conflicting lore. I understand that 100%. Nobody wants that. I don't want to sit there and constantly be ping-ponging between 3 different sources being like, is this how these guys are, or are they more like this? But I want something. That's all I ask. You guys should hold that position so you don't die terribly. I mean, if you gave writers a bit of freedom, the big thing is it wouldn't matter. Like I had said, there was the story regarding the space station that got disassembled, and then everybody was just disassembled along with the station laying on that moon. That's spooky as hell. but it was never touched on again. They didn't even bother to try to hide it and be like, oh, maybe it's one of the Catan or something like that. It's spooky, isn't it? They're just like, yeah, whatever. Moving on. So with that in mind, they don't have to care. You could have guys writing anything they want. Make it about a Inquisitor, some rogue traders. Give them, a framework. Say, hey, this is the Ordo Hereticus. This is how they work. This is the Ordo Malleus. This is how they work. Don't CS Goto this thing up. Don't have Eldar getting beaten to death by kids with sticks. Don't let them hang on like rhino tanks with random stuff, or fire prism tanks that have multi-lasers on them. Basic, don't just screw up and undo lore. They could still just write what they want. And who wouldn't want that? And even with just Imperial Guard, you could do a ton. With just the Imperial Guard, you could have a zombie apocalypse story in a hive. I think of, if you haven't read it, Death Troopers for Star Wars. If you haven't read it, read it. It's actually a really good horror book. And it isn't Disney, so it isn't kid-friendly. Which I didn't realize until recently how much Disney, kidified stuff. There's still, mature content and themes, but they definitely stepped up the kid-friendliness, which is really weird considering the main villain started out as the hero and he butchered children. But yeah, you could do a lot of stories. Hell, it could provide some use to Ordo Sepulchrum, I believe it is. There's an Ordo dedicated to dealing with Poxwalkers and the undead. And if you look online for lore, what I just said is literally all the lore. There's yeah, they deal with zombies and stuff. Cool, moving on. It's really? We're not gonna touch on that at all? I feel like that's kind of an important story beat. You could do a lot with that. New Death Guard stuff. I'd like it. What about my needs?
You are a true hero, Inquisitor.
Quick scoop up all this. And that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.